All right, we are going to work on a little exercise now. So this exercise here, as you can see on the screen, is going to have us write a program that's going to prompt the user to enter 4 unique integer values. And once we have those 4 unique integer values, the program is going to look at them, use a bunch of if-else statements that are arranged one after the other, serially arranged, and it's going to try to actually display 3 statements after about the data that you gave it. First, whether A is or is not lesser than B, whether B is or is not lesser than C, whether C is or is not lesser than D. And just to practice a little bit our fprintf and %ds and whatnot, we are going to specify here between parentheses after A, B, C, D, the value that you gave to that particular variable when you ran actually the program. All right, so not too bad. Okay, so as always, I suggest you pause this video and you actually make sure that you attempt first this exercise. So to help you along the way, we're going to have a test harness. Okay, the test harness, a list of tests, a test suite, is simply like scenarios that we're going to run our program through in order to make sure that it behaves the way that we expect it. So the first 4 columns here represent what we are going to type when we input data in the program. So we're going to use 4 unique integers, right, as we are told to do, and we're just going to use 1, 2, 3, 4 because really the value doesn't matter. We could use 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is really the relation between the numbers, which one is bigger than the other, and so on and so forth. So we're just going to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and then we're going to pick 2, 1, 3, 4 as a second test. So what we expect from the first test is that the code is going to display, so this is highly abbreviated, right? But it's going to display in essence A of value 1 is lesser than B of value 2, okay? Then it's going to display B is lesser than C, then C is lesser than D, okay? The 4 numbers are in order. And then we're going to switch it around in our second test. Because what we want to do is we want to change that behavior, and now we want to see that A is greater than B, while B is still lesser than C, C is lesser than D, okay? And then we're going to switch it around again, and you can probably see where we're going with that logic of testing, right? We want to trigger every possibility where one of the 3 statements that the program prints is going to be different. So 1, 3, 2, 4, okay, this is going to cause B to be lesser than C. Sorry, not to be lesser than C. I didn't change the sign here. There we go. To be greater than C. Okay, and everything else, A is going to be lesser than B, unchanged. C is going to be lesser than D, unchanged compared to the first test again. And then the last one, and I'm going to fix that little typo on the fly as well. The last one is 1, 2, 4, 3, which means that we expect the program to tell us that A is lesser than B. B is lesser than C, so those 2 here have not been changed compared to the original test that we ran. And then the last one, we expect the program to tell us that C is greater than D because 4 is greater than 3. Okay, so there we go. So first step, try it. Use the test to guide you, okay? Run your program through those tests, see how it behaves. Every time you observe that it behaves the way that you expected, put a checkbox in your table here or something like that, right? If it doesn't behave, as you expected, then you know that you have a bug. Okay, you have written something in your code that causes it to not fulfill the requirement. Even though you thought, most likely, that you were going to fulfill the requirement by writing what you did. So go back to the code, debug it, okay, trace through it, figure out what's going wrong, and try to fix it. All right, so pause this video, and I'm going to see you like in half a second, maybe, or more if you actually try the exercise. And we are going to go over a possible solution to this. All right, I think that was half a second. So let's go back to code here. If I can find my window, there we go. So first thing we need to do is I would get rid of the easy stuff. Okay, so the easy stuff in this case is I need to read the value of 4 integers from the user. So I'm going to declare my variables that are going to hold those values, and then I'm going to read them from the user. So int a, b, c, d. I do not initialize them, okay, so not recommended, but for the sake of speed, I'm going to do that here. Int a, b, c, d, so for variable of type int are declared in one line, okay. And then printf value, or actually, you know what, since these are just plain strings, puts value for a is, and then I'm going to do a scanf. Scanf. So I want to read an integer. I want to store it in the variable a. So ampersand and the name of the variable, that means store inside the variable a. We're going to cover that in more detail, but for now, this is what we use it for. And then we're going to do that. So we're going to do that 4 times. But before I do cut and paste, and I go nuts and I cut and paste this 4 times and modify it because I'm lazy, I would like to make sure that this compiles. Okay, so gcc main.c, it compiles, a.out, value for a is, let's say 23, there we go. It seems to be working. Okay, we could double check that a contains actually 23, but it does. But if it was a little bit more complex, we would pause and test a little bit more thoroughly here as well. Now I can go nuts. Now I can go nuts and I can do actually cut and paste like crazy. And no, this is not called cut and paste oriented programming, and so it might as well be. I'm going to do C, I'm going to do D, and I'm going to try to not do what we do when we do cut and paste like that generally, which is forget to modify one thing and get an error. Okay, so ABCD, read ABCD, we should be okay. I'm going to make sure it still compiles. I don't want to have to deal with compilation error after I've been writing a ton of code, because that's harder to figure out. Hey, looks good so far. Okay, I still haven't double checked that what ends up in A, B, C, D is actually the number, but we're going to leave it at that for now. So what else can I do here? Let me follow my thread here of thought. So we need to display here are the comparison I can make. So that's another one that's easy enough. Okay, here are the comparisons that I can make. All right, just a printf. I can do a printf, no problem. Again, compile often. Make sure that you don't let typos and stuff like that go unchecked for too long. All right, there we go. And then I need to display those messages, you know, like A, and between parentheses, the value of A is lesser than or greater than B, I am between parentheses, the value of B. So I'm going to focus on one. Once I know how to do one of those, I should be able to do the other 2 relatively painlessly. Okay, but the deal is I need to start something, and I'm not going to write the code for 3 different messages just to realize that the way that I handled the first one was wrong, and now I have bugs all over the place and it's a mess to figure out. So no, I'm going to do it one little step at a time. And there we go. We're going to start with this. So let's go back to the code. What do I have here? So I'm going to have a printf statement, that's for sure. Okay. So let's go with our printf statement. And our printf statement is going to be like something like A between parentheses, %d. So this is where I want to insert the value of A, is, and we have, like, for example, the first message is lesser than B between parentheses, %d, the value of B, and then I'm going to go to the next line. Okay, put a new line here. So I have 2 slots to fill here, 2 %ds to fill. The first one is going to be filled with the value of A. The second one with the value of B. Okay, so let's, again, very, very incremental development and compilation all the time and testing all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the comparison I can make. A, value 1 is lesser than B, value 2. Absolutely awesome. And I'm going to put a S here so that it's going to even go to the next line, and that will look a little better. Okay, let's make this a little larger, wider actually. So I know how to do one of the printf. Okay. So when do I want to display that A is lesser than B? Well, if A is lesser than B, then I want to do that printf statement. Okay. So else. Well, else I'm going to do the opposite printf statement. Remember that the numbers are supposed to be unique, so we don't have to manage the case where A is going to be equal than B. Otherwise, that would make it just a tiny bit more complicated. Actually, that's a good exercise if you want to try your hand at it. Okay, try to rewrite this code, but this time handle not only lesser than or greater than, but also the case where the two numbers are equal. Okay. All right, so if not, I just change that little sign here, lesser than, it became greater than, and I'm going to test. So now to test, I have two possibilities, right? When I run my code, it can do all of this and then end up executing this, or it can do all of this, and then because the condition is false, end up executing this instead before to do the final, printf \n. So I have two possible paths of execution throughout my code, pretty much, okay? And what I want to do is I want to trigger both of them. This is why in the tests that are given to you, you're going to notice that we have one test that's going to trigger the case where A is lesser than B. And then we have another test here that's going to trigger the case where A is greater than B. So taken together, those first two tests allow me to trigger this part of the code, this line here, and trigger this line here. So that's what we call test coverage, okay? Code coverage, sorry. Our tests altogether are going to make sure that every single line of our code at least gets executed one time, gets run one time to see if it works, yes or no, okay? So going back to the test here, so my first test is 1, 2, 3, 4, and I expect the program to display A lesser than B, so B lesser than C and C lesser than D, that's not yet implemented, so I'm just going to ignore it for now, okay? But then my second test, 2, 1, 3, 4, is going to lead my program to display A greater than B, and then B lesser than C, C lesser than D, still not implemented, I'm ignoring for now, okay? Well, let's see if that's the case. Let's see if that's working. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 1, 3, 4. We can definitely test that. So let's go back to the command line here. GCC main.c, a.out. Value for A is 1, 2, 3, 4. So here are the comparisons I can make. A, value 1, correct, is lesser than B, value 2, correct and correct. Okay, so everything is working for this first test. I'm going to mark it off, actually. I'm going to go to my, well, actually, I'm going to do that over and over and over again. But what I wanted to show you real quick is that when things are working, enjoy it, take the time to make like a check mark here or something like that, meaning, yeah, the test successfully passed, okay? Of course, we're going to rerun those tests again and again and again, so I'm not going to erase every time the mark and put them back, but that's the idea, okay? Every time you want to test your whole code, you run through all the tests, and you figure out, you make sure that all of them are working, you figure out which one are not working, and you fix them until they do work. All right, our second test. So a.out again. So still use the same code, I didn't modify it, okay? But 2, 1, 3, 4, now I'm making sure that it detects that A, value 2, is greater than B, value 1. And so far, we have passed successfully our two first tests, okay? Well, I should say we partially passed them because we still handle only the first message here, okay, that we want. So let's go back to the code, and now that we know how to handle one of the messages we need to display two more messages. So I'm going to do cut and paste again. And this time I'm going to compare B and C. And then finally I'm going to compare C and D. So it's going to be a matter of making sure I don't mess up and I don't forget to update something in those line of code, which is the biggest threat, with cut and paste oriented programming, if you want to call it that, is that you forget something and then you have like a very insidious little bug hiding in your code. So here I compare B and C, so I replace all the instances of A and B by B and C. I think I didn't miss any. And here I'm going to compare C and D. So there we go. There we are. That's a new one. C and D. There we go. And C and D here as well. C and D like data. Okay. So we have now all three messages taken into account. Let's see how that works out. GCC main.c. All right, A dot out. All right, so first, I added some code, right? I tried to add some features. My first priority is to make sure I didn't break whatever was working before. So if I go back to my test, okay, whatever was working before was actually this one, the first one, and the second one were working, but partially, okay? So we're going to write here partial in parentheses, okay, partial abbreviated in parentheses. Now I want to make sure that these two messages, A less than B and A greater than B, still show up when they should, and then I'm going to also check the next ones, okay? All right, so let's go back to the code once again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my first test. A value 1 is lesser than B value 2. That's correct. Now, what about the other message? Are they correct too? B value 2, yeah, is lesser than C value 3. That's correct, and that's correct. C value 3, D value 4, that's correct. C is lesser than D, that's correct as well. Okay, we pass the first test. So this time there's no partial success there. We actually get the 3 messages that we want from our test. So pretty much this guy here is done. It's done, but it doesn't want to erase for whatever reason. So I'm just going to scribble it out like this. Okay, full credit on this one, no partial passing anymore. What else? So second test, 2, 1, 3, 4. So now we're going to go back. We're going to go back here. Let me move a few things out of the way. There we go. We're going to go back here and test my second test. So A dot out. So 2, 1, 3, 4. So let's see. A is 2, B is 1, 2, 1, yeah. 3, 4 is for C and D. So that part of the display is correct here. Now, what about the relation A is greater than B? That's correct. B is lesser than C. That's correct. C is lesser than D. That's correct as well. So we have a second test that is running as well here. So we can go here, and apparently it erased what I was not looking. This is strange. Okay. This passes. This passes. Then 1, 3, 2, 4. Let's go to the next one. 1, 3, 2, 4. So run my code again. 1, 3, 2, 4. All right. So first checking that the variable has the right value. By now it's kind of a given, but A is 1, B is 3, correct. Then 2 and 4. So C is 2, D is 4, correct. A is lesser than B. Yep. B is greater than C, correct. C is lesser than D, correct. So we pass again that test, and we keep track of that. It seems long, it seems tedious, but this is actually how you make sure that what you write is worth something, okay? So that whole testing business, you're going to get better at it. You're going to do it faster than I do in the videos, because in the video, I keep narrating, you know, what's happening constantly, so that kind of like makes it longer. But you're going to get better at that, faster at that, and this is actually the method to write your code and test it continuously as you write it. That's going to ensure that you produce good code. So this being said, last test, 1, 2, 4, 3. Let's go back here, 1, 2, 4, 3, somewhere. There we go, 1, 2, 4, 3. 1, 2, 4, 3. Again, A is 1, B is 2, C is 4, D is 3, correct. A is lesser than B, correct. B is lesser than C, correct as well. C is greater than D, correct as well. So that's it. We passed all of our tests, and I don't know, I have no idea why every time I switch window, all of my graffitis here are going away. That's annoying, but I mean, all right, so be it, we'll work with it. But we passed all 4 tests. So now we can say with confidence that we have successfully implemented our code. There are more tests that we could do, okay? Like, for example, we could try to create a situation where A is greater than B, and, for example, B is greater than C as well, and C is lesser than D. So compared to the original test, both the 2 first statements that are printed by the program would be changed. We could do also permutation like that. That would be like exhaustive, you know, testing of our application. Nothing wrong with that, except that in some cases it's not feasible because there are too many combinations. But in this little exercise, we could definitely do that. The reason for which I am not going to that extent in testing is because of the structure of the code. what we are doing here is called white box, open box testing. Okay, that just means that it's the opposite of black box testing, where you don't see your code. Your code is in a closed box, right? So here we can see the code and we can write the code and the test together, and both of them inform one another. When I look at my code, I see that I have a if statement and then another if statement that is independent of the first one. So that's why I don't have to test all of the other combination, because once I tested that this statement was working correctly, I can test independently that the second worked correctly. I can test independently that the third one works correctly as well. Okay, so having this kind of thought process when you're writing code is super important. Okay, this is what's going to distinguish you from maybe an amateur, and I would venture to say that most amateur programmers also think this way. Okay, it's just the right way to think to develop your code with some form of rigor. Okay, constantly compile it, constantly test it, have an idea of what test your code needs to successfully pass in order for you to gain confidence that it's actually implementing the requirements correctly. All right, and with this, we are going to call it a wrap with this video. Again, thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to actually pile up a little bit more stuff on top of this exercise.